I'm glad you're here. But this has been a contemplative period of time in my world of late for a variety of different reasons. And I don't know if you have ever had one of those times in your life. Probably many of us have, but we need to have them probably a little more regularly because we can get into the routine of life and life just happens. And we just kind of take whatever we get and don't stop really to think very much about it. But so in the last little while, well, over some time for some of it, but you know, my parents and my big sister have all passed from this life. And lots of other, of course, family, friends. Yesterday I assisted in a memorial gathering for a man a few years older than me, but not very many years older than me. A strong, active, outdoorsy guy, you know, and Margaret is here this morning, and we just lifted you up in prayer for that time. But you know, he had his own set of strengths and weaknesses and flaws and friends and loves and disappointments. Much of the music for the service was from a young believing musician who died at about age 40, just having delivered a Down's syndrome child. So now her husband, just within a few years, is raising a child and doing it alone. And you know, whatever all has happened with that, I don't know. But this week earlier, I was at a memorial service for a younger lady that was a former parishioner. And so, you know, as I enter kind of a new year and a new chapter of life, I wrestle with some different issues than I did back in the good old days when I knew everything. You know, recently I personally have experienced a couple of accidents, so you're all well aware of that. You know, a year and a half ago I kind of came to in the round corral and nothing would move, and I thought, well, Lord, is this the end of the trail? You know, is this where it ends? And really, actually, as odd as it is, I was pretty much at peace with that. You know, it was interesting. On the way back from Portland, Rena and I got rear-ended by a pretty good-sized truck. I don't know what all issues that may generate, if any physically. You know, obviously the car is boogered up and, you know, is going to require some help and attention and all that stuff. But the thing is, in neither one of my recent accidents, and I can look back at a number of other places in my life, I could bore you to death, you know, for weeks, you know, with several different instances that have happened in my life where there's not a thing in the world I could have done about it. There's just not a thing in the world I could have done about it. Here I was, and life could have just been over, but wasn't. And so, many of you have undoubtedly had those circumstances that you're aware of, and how many of us have had them that we're not even aware of. I mean, how often have we come to driving down the road, you know, and we're all of a sudden we're over the line. That happens to people every day of the world, and it's fatal. Why didn't it happen to us at that particular time? Well, you know, no telling, but here we are. And that's interesting to me as well as fascinating. Sometimes I ponder and wonder whether or not my life has counted for anything really. The enemy whispers to me, and perhaps my flesh goes along for the ride, that I've spent my life trying to lead little old ladies across the street that didn't want to go. You know, trying to help folks that often don't want help. Attempting to preach and teach a message that runs counter to what is popular and counter to even what makes sense just through our physical eyes. I've experienced a lot of things in my life, some of which I would be happy to experience again. and quite a few that I would not want to experience again, and pray that I don't. Can you connect with that? All of our situations are different, yet we are occupying the same small place in the world together. Here we are in one room today, in this culture, at this time of day. Here we are. But we've come from a wide variety of places and situations. I kind of been looking, and last night I was challenged freshly with the thought that life is kind of like a conveyor belt that is moving along, and it is used to kind of sort out people, you know, in a variety of ways. And nobody stays on it forever because it keeps rolling around. You know, some come off before they're ever even born. You know, some drop off at birth, and sometimes mother and child both drop off during birth. I have had the privilege and trauma of assisting a number of people and putting little children in the ground and seeing them having come off of the conveyor belt way early, and then I've been able to see some come off of the end of the conveyor belt and just, you know, drop off. And some seem to think that the conveyor belt ride is all there is, you know? But I believe, because of what the Bible teaches, and hence what I've been taught, and what makes the most sense to me, is that the ride on the conveyor belt is not the only thing, it's not the main thing, it's not the whole purpose for our being. And that in fact, it is what keeps the conveyor belt moving, and what surrounds it, and what is undergirding it, so that when we come off of it, that's what really matters most. While we have our time in this world, in our particular culture, with our background, training, our perceptions, one of the most significant issues seems to revolve always around money. It is the amount of money we are born into, or that we acquire one way or another, determines in large measure the sort of physical environment that we're in. It determines the kind and variety of food we eat, the shelter, the sort of shelter that we acquire and live in, the sort of transportation we have and why we even have transportation, how we spend the bulk of our time. And this has not been the case in all cultures for all time. You know, the mainly subsistence cultures that don't operate really on like a money kind of background. I mean, if you live in the kind of climate and you have the kind of culture where basically, you know, you wake up whenever you wake up and you run out and pick fruit or whatever you're going to get and you eat it, and then whatever you do for the rest of the day, you do the rest of the day. But that's an entirely different world than we are born in and that we live in. And however much money we have seems to determine how comfortable we are while we're riding the conveyor belt. But once our physical needs are met, once we have air, which is, you know, a good thing, typically, water, food, whatever, shelter, and particularly, you know, in Montana and any places north, you know, you need shelter, whatever it is, whether it's enough clothing to just pack on or whatever it is, you know, you got to have shelter from the various elements. But once those needs are basically met, then there seems to be a profound urge among us to have more. And in our particular setting, the acquisition of stuff, of resources, is a huge part of life. Perhaps the largest chunk of our waking time is spent gathering up stuff. So since this seems to me to be beyond dispute in our world, how should we as believers in Jesus view that whole process? The elders have pondered and believe, and I do too, that we should take a little bit of time away from just, the ongoing chronological life of Jesus and take a look at some biblical financial principles. And I think this is wise because I think very few, even believers, operate in such a fashion that God can really bless and accomplish His plan and purpose for us. We're all much more blessed than we deserve. I mean, the fact that however it happened, we won the lottery of life by being here and living here in the United States of America in this day. I mean, most people in most times of the world could not even comprehend the stunning blessings that we have. And yet, I'm haunted by the idea that somehow or another God has more, even for those of us in this extremely blessed environment. Are we reaching our potential individually or collectively? Now, this whole business is a huge topic. Man, just as I have not scratched the surface and I've been digging around in there, and there are so many different pieces to this. But I'm excited for the trip. Our belief about this life and what comes next should inform us about how to spend our time and energy. Most of us, honestly, most of us in this room actually have more money or access to more money than would be needed to simply survive, right? But I suspect that many, and perhaps most of us, also face financial stress fairly regularly, and sometimes financial crisis. Would you agree? Often the church is called upon to help someone with a financial need. We support a lot of different ministries. We have this morning a Ray of Hope, are gathering stuff there to try to minister collectively to others that are having needs in that regard. And we have to Feeding the Flathead. We do a lot of things together to try to assist those that are in need, and that's really good. But so for our understanding and our own situation and understanding folks' situation, I offer some thoughts. And man, these may be random, and just fasten your seatbelt as we move along here, because I'm wrestling with a lot of thoughts. We all face different stages or chapters in our life, and our circumstances change. Sometimes it happens imperceptibly. Age sneaks up on us. One day you're 5, and the next day you're 25, and you wonder, how did I get here? And then you're 35 and 45, and age itself just kind of sneaks up on us, right? The older we are, the more we recognize that. You young kids, 1 year seems like forever. Oh, I wish I was a teenager. Man, boy, wouldn't that be fun? And soon I want to get out from into the home so I can, live life my way and don't have to listen to these old dingbat parents, that I have been afflicted with. It's amazing they can hardly get out of bed on their own, you know what I'm saying, that kind of stuff. But when you get older, some of these things just kind of slip up on us. But sometimes these chapters are pretty stark, rigid changes in life. There are certain childhood events that really impact. We all have different ones, and if we were to share how we were raised and stuff, probably most of us could point to some kind of situation that happened that really shaped us, maybe at a young age. Getting married. Man, you get married, holy smokes, jumping tamales, that changes things into a whole new chapter. And if that goes well, it opens up a wonderful chapter. And if it goes well all the time, you're probably lying through your tooth, because, you know, life happens, right? But, you know, it's a game changer. And then, if you happen to have a child, or possibly even twins, or even something as simple as quintuplets, it is a game changer, right? I mean, life happens. Our son and daughter-in-law are going through this today. They got a new little short person on the site. And this little toot that can't really communicate much is really rapidly training them. You know? Or you come to a time when, you know, a new job or career comes along, or no job. That's a game changer. Or retirement, or an accident, or injury. Man, you know, in our case, of course, we're dealing, you know, with our son-in-law, you all are very well aware, that is driving along one day and has an accident, and all of a sudden, I mean, one minute he's driving along healthy, has a job, has a career, you know, well thought of, highly respected, doing all this. The next minute he is a hurting unit beside the road and paraplegic. You know, I mean, so there are some times that new chapters really come thrust upon us forcefully. And wow, it's a new day. And so now what do we do? How do we respond? How do we look at life? So I believe that the Bible is for all men of all ages, in all cultures, in all circumstances. I believe that the Bible, properly understood, is God's counsel to all of us, no matter where we come from. Now, it's not merely a list of instructions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where you can pick it up and in 30 seconds you can figure it out. It is not that way. It seems like in all of life there is a necessity to dig, to think, to investigate. You know, we just are created that way, and the Bible is no different. I don't know how many times I have read the entire Bible cover to cover, reading it again now chronologically, and I am discovering every time I open it up practically new stuff, and I'm going, wow, that is really interesting. I read this passage over and over again. It never made sense. But all of a sudden now, seeing the context of it that I was not prepared to see 30 years ago, all of a sudden it's now alive and vital in a whole new way. And I believe our relationship with God is that way, that we need a fresh touch today for where we are. Because we are in a different situation than we were a week ago, a year ago, 5 years ago, and we need a fresh touch. You with me? The Bible, I believe, honestly, I believe it was given and preserved by God to give us the instruction that we need to live life well, to live it fruitfully, to live it blessed, and to be able to leave a legacy of godliness to those that come after us. It reveals to us God's heart, His mind, His plan, His purpose. So whatever state we're in is the time and place where we need freshly to study. My life situation is different than when I was a kid at home. It's or a single college student, or newly married, or a parent. It's different than when we lived in Nebraska. You know, Runzas and all. I don't know if anybody but Nebraskans have it, but there were whole stores in Nebraska that would sell Runzas. They called it Runza. Call the store in Nebraska Runza. Get out of town, right? Go figure. Back in the old country. But the Word of God applies freshly to us at each stage of life, and we have different responsibilities, different needs, different abilities, and different folks that we connect with at each stage along our ride. In Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30, Jesus said this, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Now, I read this verse yesterday, and even yesterday I had a different take on it. I've always viewed this basically as, if you're not saved, you need to get saved. You need to come to Jesus and get saved. Well, I believe that's still true, but I believe there's another whole realm of meaning also that we need to try to ponder. He says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I'm gentle, humble in heart, and you'll find rest for your souls. Now, just for drills this morning, let me ask you, how many of you, from time to time, whatever your age, but probably older folk are going to respond, you know, I mean, the older we are, the more, how many of you from time to time feel weary or burdened? That's most of you, and those of you that didn't vote are just not paying attention. If you're sitting next to someone who didn't vote, jab them. They probably fell asleep, and they may have fallen off the conveyor belt. Check it out. A yoke links a couple of oxen. Most of you are well familiar with plowing with oxen, I'm sure, from your former lives. Or it ties a couple of oxen or other kind of critters together. And typically in the training process, a young or inexperienced one is yoked to an experienced one to figure out how to pull and not just run around the pasture aimlessly, because critters left to their own devices, they go to eat when they want to eat, and they do whatever they're going to do, and they're going to do it, and go to get a drink and do what, you know. But when they're yoked, all of a sudden they have a purpose, they have a point, they have something that their owner wants them to do. But if you just take a couple of wild hares and tie them together and send them off down the, you know, there's no telling what's going to happen. So in the training process, oftentimes you take the older, experienced one that knows how to go at the right rate of speed and all that stuff, and you tie the younger, rambunctious one to them, and, you know, that teaches them how to do whatever. Well, Jesus invites us to take his yoke and to learn from him. And so he invites us, as he has a plan, as he has a purpose, as he has a direction, for us to get in the yoke with him so we can learn what to do, so that rather than just aimlessly wander around the pasture, we actually put our time and energy in a direction that accomplishes something. And I think there's something about this passage that is significant here. That's what discipleship is all about. One of the things I believe that has happened in the modern American church, and the other day several pastors were talking about this, you know, and kind of reevaluating that we have had in the church this idea, just get saved, just come to Jesus, you know, repeat after me, dear Jesus, I'm a sinner, come into my heart, congratulations brother, you are forgiven, you're a part of the family of God, you're saved, you're on your way to heaven, and, you know, and some people add on, no matter whatever else you ever do from now on, your ticket is punched for glory. So just, again, repeat after me, okay, did you mean that Jesus was Lord? Honestly, you know, cross your elbow and your heart and spit on your elbow and a needle and eye. Did you really mean it? If you meant it, then you're good. And somehow we have viewed that as the epitome of our relationship with God. But what Jesus is talking about here is a different thing. Yeah, that is the entryway. That's when we can become born again. That's when we can become saved. That's when we can trust in Jesus. But the whole point of our lives is to become disciples of Jesus, not just converts. And that is a lifetime pursuit. And it is in the learning to do that, and learning from Jesus and his word, that he can give us the rest and make us free to do what we're supposed to do. So my interest is for us to walk together to freshly take a look at this yoke as it relates particularly to the whole realm of money and finances and whatever. And again, that is a huge, huge, huge topic. It'll be a process, and I invite you to study with me and to enter together into a journey of learning not merely how our culture does things. See, we kind of know how our culture does things. And we do stuff just because everybody else does. That's what we've learned how to do. But is that the way that brings freedom? Is that the way that really brings joy? Is that the way that really brings fruitfulness? Well, some of it may and some of it may not. But we're going to have to take a look at what God says, not just what our society says matters. So much of our time and worry is invested in the financial realm of life. No matter how much money we make, it seems like it's never quite enough. How many of you have ever had a job, however much money you made, where you felt like, man, I don't ever need any more. I'm good. Whatever, right? Anybody ever had one of them? See, I don't know if anybody ever does. A billionaire once was asked, how much money do you need? And his answer was, well, just a little more. You know? A very wealthy man died, and his personal accountant was asked, just how much did he leave? And the guy replied, all of it. As I've looked into this a little bit more for this series, I see a whole bunch of scriptural principles that come into play regarding this business of money. I'm not entirely sure where this study will go, but I'm increasingly curious to find out. How many of you spend a lot of your time thinking about money or the whole financial realm of life with all that that involves? Now, this is not a trick question. You know, I want you to get some skin in the game here. I want you to vote here. I want you to be thinking, because my suspicion is that almost every one of us spend a tremendous amount of time thinking about that aspect of life. And I don't know that it's good or bad. It depends on what we're thinking about it and how we're thinking about it, and there's a lot of factors with that. But the fact that it is at very close to the center of our world, I think, is evidence. Very few of us are so financially independent that we can do anything we want to do. And if we are in that category, I need to see you after the service. But if we are in that category, we have an entirely different set of facts to deal with before God. So, I suspect that most of us live fairly close to the edge of disaster. Certainly most Americans do. That, you know, if all of a sudden, we'll just kind of find out. If all of a sudden something came up and you had a $100,000 medical bill, which would probably be something like a sliver today, but, you know, you have a $100,000 medical bill, how many would, you know, be in all of a sudden a pretty interesting bind? Okay, see, in our day and age, that's nothing. Literally, a $100,000 bill can go just like that. I mean, you don't even have to be hurt bad, you know, to have something like that happen. It just, I mean, it's crazy. So I say that to say this, that most of us are probably living pretty close to the edge of, you know, the wheels could come entirely off in our world, and not much we can do about it. But is it good? Is that the good thing, that we live that close to the edge? Or if we don't live that close to the edge, is that good? Well, perhaps it depends. It depends on our perspective, on our heart, on our mind, on our spirit. And that's a part of where I'd like to look at. What is our financial situation, and how should we view our financial situation? Man, the Bible teaches a lot about things having to do with money. I mean, there's the whole topic of working, you know, our vocation. What do we do for to make a living? What do we do in that regard? How about investing? How about tithing? How about giving? How about contentment? How about serving God and others? What about the whole thing of debt? What about diligence or planning or worry? Man, when you start digging into the area of things that is touched by money or finances, it is an interesting and exciting and challenging study. And so hopefully we're getting ready to embark on that. Now, Jesus offers us in our world today, in the Flathead Valley in Montana, Jesus, I believe, offers us rest for our souls. If we will take his yoke upon us and learn from him. And so that's the process. Now, God's principles basically, I think, work for believers or unbelievers. Many of them. Okay? In Matthew 5:45, he says, he causes his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust, the righteous and the unrighteous. It doesn't matter whether you're a Jesus little sunbeam disciple or whether you're a pagan from wherever. If you plant corn, you're not going to get rutabagas. I mean, there are just certain things, you know, there are certain principles that God has put into his creation that work. You know, if you plant corn, if you avoid the drought, if you get some water and the grasshoppers don't get it, and on and on and on, well, you're going to get corn, but you're sure not going to get apples. If you plant apples, well, you may get apples in the fullness of time, and you may get a gob of apples. You may get more apples than you can eat, in which case, if you get more apples than you can eat, you can maybe turn them into money and use your money to buy rutabagas that you can't grow. Then everybody needs a lot more of those nasty things, I suppose. So, but I believe also that the Bible teaches us that there are blessings that are available to God's people that are not available to the rest of the world. You know, some things, I mean, the rain falls on the just and on the unjust. You plant corn, you're going to get corn. You know, there are principles that God has put that are for all mankind. But there are other things where God wants to bless his people. And I'd like us to look at some of those things. Now, let me say going in, I do not buy for 1 second much of the foolish health and wealth, name it and claim it, blab it and grab it, messages that I've heard. Oh, you are a prince or you're a little princess and God wants you rich and you deserve to have a Rolls Royce because you're a child of the king, and you know, and so forth. Now, the problem is there is always a small element of truth in every heresy. But folks, we just look around our world, if you're paying any attention at all, and you're looking at the Christians in the world who have lost everything because they follow Jesus, including losing their lives, you know, and they're persecuted and facing challenges. Well, that happens. That happens in our world. Is it because they're wicked and they're disobeying God? Are they just as much a prince as those of us who are sitting watching our big screen TVs and all that? You know, I don't think so. So our culture has driven that kind of foolish doctrine. Okay, so I don't buy that. On the other hand, there are blessings that God has for his people. Some of them may end up being financial and in that realm, but most of them, I think, have to do with getting to the place within our minds, within our hearts, of experiencing the blessing and the rest in the goodness of God and having the confidence that he is able to take us through this life. He will be with us on the conveyor belt of life. And when our turn comes to fall off and we don't know when that happens, he is there to catch us and take us into a situation that we can't even comprehend, that is far beyond our understanding. You know, a tiny little baby, I have not interviewed, you know, a lot of unborn babies to see how they really think. And actually, one of the challenging things is, even if you interview one that has just come forth out of the womb, it's hard to really get much out of them, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know what their view of the world is, but whenever they are brought into the world, they are exposed immediately to a whole new dimension of life. You know, no longer are they in this warm, wet world of, you know, floating around, you know, in mama's tummy. I mean, suddenly they are thrust into a different world, And then the process of adjusting to this world comes along. My suspicion really is that the same thing happens when we come off of the conveyor belt, when it is our time to die. That Jesus has given us promise after promise after promise of seeing us through this life and having gone to prepare a place for us beyond this. That is something we can't even comprehend, but is worth investigating and worth striving for, worth living for, and worth even dying for. Amen. Is what the Bible teaches, all these things for us. I believe that all those who believe in Jesus are called to a higher purpose than just having a better car, just having better carpet, just having a thicker bed, just having, more toys. All of the things that we spend our time gathering up, we have a much higher calling than that. So the beauty of the gospel is that a person can be forgiven and made clean. Whatever our circumstances, the beauty of the gospel today is that however you were coming into this gathering, I believe that God offers a new day for us. We don't know what the day may bring, but Jesus wants to go with us. He wants to walk with us, and He has promises for us. He has insight for us. He says, put the yoke on freshly and learn from me, because I'm meek and lowly in heart. This is not cracking the whip over you. This is a matter of saying, hey, let's think. Let's reason together. Pay attention. Learn from me so that we can go on and find and fulfill our purpose. See, no matter what our situation is, we can be forgiven. Man, if you came into this room and you have sin hanging off of you all over the place, if you have screwed up at every point in life, we've all screwed up plenty in life, Jesus offers forgiveness. He will wipe the slate clean, which is just an amazing thing. But He then also says, now put the yoke on and come with me and learn from me so that I can show you what else is important in life. But, if we are in a situation where we come to Christ and if we're have an unexpected pregnancy and this is not a good thing, and we get saved, the chances are we still have that. If we come to Jesus and we're deep in debt, well, after we get saved, we're probably still deep in debt. We have all the things, but I believe also that Jesus comes along and says, now as you walk with me, I want to teach you, I want to show you, so that we can eliminate some of the effects of the fall and prepare you for a place where all the effects of the fall are removed. So we need to be saved, and we need everybody to be saved, and I want you to be saved. One of the final passages that I'd like to look at this morning is in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 14. The man without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God. They are foolishness to him. He cannot understand them because they are spiritually discerned. Folks, a lot of the things that we will talk about in time to come, about finances and whatever, any mortal person could get it if they want to get it. But there are other things that you cannot figure out on your own. They are spiritually discerned. Some of the principles in the Word of God regarding finances do not make sense to the unsaved mind, and they don't make sense to those who are not committed to learning of the things of the Spirit, because they just don't add up to the things of this world. And the question before all of us is, do we really want to take the yoke and learn from Jesus so that we can have that rest for our souls, or do we want to just keep on thrashing and crashing and floundering smacking our head up against the brick wall, and then backing up and hitting it again, and backing up and hitting it again, and backing up and hitting it again till we fall off of the conveyor belt, or for whatever other reason just get old, you know. And I mean, there's a difference between getting the answers, but they are spiritually discerned in many cases. And that involves a decision on our part, and maybe a fresh decision as we move along. You know, each time we encounter new stuff, it's a fresh decision. Do I want to listen to this, or am I going to trust, you know, my banker? You know, am I going to trust the financial advisor, or am I going to trust just what I learned so I know I can do this? Or are there things that I have to say, wow, I want to trust God and see what He can do in that realm? Well, that's probably enough for this morning, since I'm hearing rumblings, some from stomachs and just some from the malcontents whining and moaning about, you know, the length of the sermon. But I am really interested in moving forward along this new path for a little bit. I don't know how long it will last, but man, I am excited to see, because I think that there are things we have not begun to plumb the depths of that God is going to teach us in the days and weeks that will come, that can help to supply, hopefully, a greater sense of peace and rest. Amen? Amen.
Thank you for watching. For questions on today's video, please reach out to us at www.flatheadecclesia.org.